What would you do if they built their success on your work and still said you lacked vision? They started the meeting 30 minutes early. Again. I stood frozen at the glass conference door watching 12 faces pivot toward me, some with pity, others with thinly veiled contempt. The slide on the screen behind Victor had my name on it. Her analysis is why we lost the Evergreen account he declared like I wasn't standing right there. The air tightened in my chest. My throat burned, but I said nothing. I took the only remaining seat far from the notepads, the water, and any eye contact. They'd made it clear. I wasn't meant to be here. But this was the final proof I needed. Before I tell you how I became the woman who owned their future, their clients, their contracts, their careers, I want you to imagine sitting in that chair, humiliated, alone, unseen, and still holding back everything you could say. My name is Nora, not Nora from Princeton. Not Nora with family connections or a fancy last name. Just Nora, the girl whose mom scrubbed other people's houses, who earned a half scholarship to state college, who pulled double shifts and still graduated top of her class. The girl who chose finance because numbers made sense when people didn't. Numbers didn't care about your zip code, your accent, or whether your handbag matched your heels. 5 years ago, I joined Keystone Investment Group. In reviews, they said I was detail-oriented and reliable, which in corporate code meant give her the grunt work. Let her fix the spreadsheets. Let her double-check the numbers behind our big, shiny deals. I watched, while men like Victor pitched decks built on my research. I watched while EMTT took credit for my projections that landed him on Forbes's Next 30 list. I watched them get bonuses, while I got thank you emails, if that. But I stayed. I laughed at their jokes, took late-night calls, showed up to meetings no one thought to invite me to. I became the ghost in the office present but never fully there, working but never seen. And while they overlooked me, I was watching them. They called it strategy realignment. I called it what it was, punishment for being right. I knew something was off when EMTT wouldn't let me join the client call. Your presentation style, he said, lacks polish. Helios expects a certain tone, or just a certain face. He didn't know I'd already studied the Helios files, or that I'd been tracking their growth and struggles for over a year. I had data models and a vision, a roadmap to make them market leaders. But he dismissed it. Just like Victor always did. They didn't even open my report, said I wasted valuable time. What they didn't say out loud because they didn't have to was this: I was never supposed to speak up, never supposed to think big, just quietly support the men who did. The next morning, HR sent the email, administrative leave, for strategy realignment training, corporate speak for we're pushing you out. I sat at my desk stunned while Victor handed me a cardboard box. We've packed up your things, he said, not meeting my eyes. Inside, a cracked coffee mug, a photo of my mother, and a dead plant. They hadn't watered it, just like they hadn't nurtured anything I brought to the table. You'll be paid through the end of the month, Victor added. We think it's best for everyone. Everyone. Except me. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already started building something far more powerful than any strategy deck they'd ever approved. I'd been quietly investing, tracking the companies they ignored, backing the founders they called unpolished or risky, women-led startups, sustainable tech, emerging markets. One of those investments, a minority stake in a struggling solar tech company called Helios Systems. Yes, that Helios, the one they just took on as a client. While they were mocking my ideas in the boardroom, I had already outperformed their firm's annual returns. While they were blacklisting me from meetings, I was building a portfolio that could shift an entire market sector. But I stayed silent, let them talk, let them believe I was finished. They thought they were cutting ties. I was cutting deals. During those 2 weeks of administrative leave, I made 27 calls, not to friends, not to family, to investors. People who had quietly watched my independent portfolio outperform Keystone's for 3 straight years. People who didn't care about titles or whether I fit into a boys' club. People who respected returns. One of them was Elizabeth, founder of a women-led investment collective with capital and conviction. I told her everything. Meridia Technologies is undervalued by 43%, I explained. Their subsidiary Helios has tech that could change the future of residential solar. Their problem, mismanagement, lack of strategic vision. She didn't blink. How fast can we move? She asked. 10 days later, the papers were signed. Through a private holding company I'd set up over a year ago, we acquired a controlling interest in Meridia Technologies. Quietly, legally, completely, and no one at Keystone even noticed. They hadn't thought to check who was buying shares, because to them, I didn't exist. When I returned to the office, my badge no longer worked. I waited in the lobby like a stranger. HR eventually escorted me up. There's been a reassessment, they said awkwardly. Your leave has been extended. Victor intercepted us at my desk. That won't be necessary, he said, shoving a box into my arms. It's already packed. My voice stayed calm. What happened with the Helios account? He glanced away. Complications, nothing we can't handle. He had no idea those complications were mine, because the moment we finalized our acquisition, I instructed Helios management to pause all external consulting contracts. Keystone's work under review. That same day, I officially became the woman who owned the company they thought they were saving. I walked out of Keystone unemployed on paper, but in reality, I held the future of their biggest new client. They asked me back for continuity. What they got was a lesson in who really owned the room. Weeks passed. Meridia thrived. We restructured leadership, injected funding into Helios, and within 1 month, productivity soared by 34%. Then came the invitation. Helios was considering long-term investment partners again. Several firms were asked to pitch, including Keystone. But this time, I wasn't sitting behind a spreadsheet. I was sitting at the top of the food chain. Through my position as chair of the investor group that now owned Meridia, I arranged to attend the final presentation dinner as a silent observer. Helios executives played their roles to perfection. They asked Keystone to bring one analyst in particular, me. Victor called, voice dripping with fake warmth. Nora, we may have been hasty. Helios requested your presence. We'd like you to join the dinner. We're prepared to offer you your position back with a modest compensation bump. I kept my tone light. Of course. I'd be happy to attend. Excellent. But just to be clear, he added, your role would be strictly observational. EMTT will lead the presentation. Understood, I said. I arrived at the Aurelian 30 minutes early, the same exclusive restaurant where I had once been told I wasn't client-facing enough. This time, Paloma, the new Helios CEO, greeted me with a knowing smile. You're early, she said loud enough for the servers to hear. Nervous, just prepared, I replied. She guided me to the far end of the long dining table. My place card read simply, Nora, Analyst, no title, no last name. Is this okay? Paloma asked, eyes glinting. Perfect. The Keystone team arrived moments later. Victor, EMTT, Harriet, Dimitri. Talia. They faltered when they saw me but recovered quickly, plastering on professional smiles. Victor gave a stiff nod. Nora. I returned it with a quiet evening. They didn't know the 2 unfamiliar faces seated beside Paloma were Elizabeth and Marco Meridia's new COO. Dinner began. Victor dominated conversation, puffing up Keystone's visionary leadership. EMTT chimed in with case studies. No one addressed me. They thought I was a prop, a leftover. Then Paloma cleared her throat. Before we begin, she said, I have a question. Nora, what exactly was your role in the original Helios strategy? Every head turned toward me. Victor jumped in fast. She provided some early research, entry-level support. The core strategy came from EMTT. Paloma raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Because we found Nora's original strategy proposal in your server files, the one recommending investment and restructuring over liquidation. The room went still. Victor's smile froze. That report was internal. It didn't meet our firm's standards, he said quickly, and yet Paloma replied it perfectly aligned with the direction we've taken. To great success. EMTT, still standing with the presentation remote in hand, looked suddenly unsure whether to continue. Harriet suggested they move on. Marco cut in. Actually, I'd like to hear more. Nora, could you explain your current relationship with Meridia Technologies' 5 keystone heads whipped toward me? I folded my napkin, looked Victor square in the eye. I led the investment group that acquired controlling interest in Meridia last month. Silence. We implemented the exact strategy I proposed while at Keystone. Efficiency is up 34%, revenue projections have jumped 27%, and employee retention has stabilized. Victor knocked over his water glass. That's impossible. I built my portfolio over 3 years, I said, quietly, successfully, while you used my work to pitch your deals. Their mouths said welcome back. Their eyes said, how did we miss this? The room shifted. Victor's voice came back thinner this time. This is highly irregular. There are obvious conflict of interest issues. There were, I replied evenly. Back when I was employed at Keystone, not anymore. Administrative leave, Victor corrected out of habit. The paperwork said termination. It didn't matter. What mattered now was this: I wasn't on trial anymore. I was the one deciding who stayed in the room. Elizabeth spoke next tone, crisp and clear. As part of our restructuring, we're evaluating all consulting relationships. Keystone's contract is under review. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. Paloma raised a hand to signal the servers. They passed around new folders, one for each person at the table. Inside, a detailed org chart of Meridia Technologies. At the top, my name. Underneath that, a new service provider structure. Keystone wasn't listed. This can't be legal, Harriet muttered, flipping through the pages. It's been reviewed by 3 legal teams, Elizabeth replied smoothly. The acquisition was conducted on the public market. No internal information was used, but she was part of our team. EMTT protested. I was the one you removed from the account, I reminded him, after rejecting the strategy that's now driving Helios's recovery. Dimitri, bless him, was the first to break the stunned silence. You're the investor. I nodded. Yes, I acquired the parent company. Victor's expression twisted. You planned this. I recognized an opportunity, I said calmly, the same way I recognized dozens of them before, and was ignored. Then I looked across the table to the Helios team. As the controlling partner, I've been reassessing our advisory partnerships. Keystone failed to recognize the value of Helios. I don't see how we can continue with a firm that couldn't see potential until it was handed to them. Victor spoke quickly, the desperation starting to crack his polished tone. Our new proposal includes significant revisions, all of which borrow from my original analysis, I interrupted. Silence. Talia's lips parted slightly, just enough to betray a dawning realization. Dimitri looked at me, not with shame, but with something like respect. Then I stood, calm, collected, unshakable. But I believe in talent, I said, addressing the room, which is why I'm extending offers. I looked at Dimitri first. Your analytics are strong, but they've been buried under louder voices. At Meridia, you'll be heard. His eyes widened. Then I turned to Talia. Your marketing insight was wasted under Victor's leadership, but your instincts, they're sharp. I'd like you on our strategic team. Victor stood abruptly. You're poaching my team. I'm offering them a future based on merit, I replied. The future I was denied. They tried to erase me. Instead, I became the name they couldn't stop saying. The rest of the dinner was silence and whispers. Harriet furiously typed under the table, probably texting Keystone's leadership. Victor kept glancing toward Paloma, trying to salvage control. EMTT had nothing left to add. His confidence had drained out like spilled wine. Only Dimitri and Talia stayed after dessert. Marco handed them both Meridia contact cards. No contracts, no pressure. Just opportunities, something I had begged for and never received. As Victor passed by me on his way out, he leaned in and muttered, "This isn't over." I didn't even flinch. "You're right," I said. "It's just beginning." The next Monday, I stepped into my new office at Meridia headquarters. My assistant, yes, I had one now, showed me the view. From the window, I could see the building that housed Keystone's 3 floors. From this height, it looked small. Within 6 months, we transformed Helios into the crown jewel of the renewable energy space. Our solar tech became an industry standard, revenue tripled, but more important, the culture shifted. I built a mentorship program for employees from non-traditional backgrounds. People like me who didn't grow up with a silver spoon or a private school resume. People who just needed someone to say, "I see you." Dmitry became our head of strategy. Talia built an award-winning brand campaign that put Helios on the national radar. As for the others, Victor left Keystone after client losses triggered internal chaos. EMTT stayed, but he never regained his title. Harriet adapted as always, but without her usual grace. The firm limped along, minus 20% of its portfolio and any real credibility. When Meridia went public 18 months later, my original investment multiplied 30-fold. Forbes called me the visionary no one saw coming. But those who were in that room, they knew. They knew this wasn't luck. This was patience. This was planning. This was power. Earned in silence. I didn't keep trophies. I didn't frame articles. I didn't even keep that cardboard box. Just one thing. That dead plant they left on my desk. It now sits in my window, flourishing, reaching. A reminder that growth isn't about proving others wrong. It's about becoming more than they ever imagined. Have you ever been overlooked, treated like furniture in your own story? Maybe you're still waiting for someone to recognize your value. Here's what I'll say. You don't need their permission. You need your plan. And if you stay ready, your moment will come. Because the best view always comes after the hardest climb. Share your story in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated and found a way to rise? Like and subscribe if you want more real stories of quiet power, wild comebacks, and justice served cold. Until next time, this is Nora, and I'm done being silent.